Imagine you are at one of the greatest parties in history. 1,000 guests, gold and silver everywhere, the finest wines of the empire, music, dancing, women. King Belshazzar is at the center of it all, laughing, drinking, celebrating. He doesn't know that while he toasts, entire armies are moving beneath the city. He doesn't know that the Persians are already inside the walls. He doesn't know that an invisible hand is writing on the wall. That night, the greatest city of the ancient world fell, not because of an epic battle, not because of a bloody invasion, because of a party, because of wine, because of arrogance. Welcome to Babylon, 539 BC, the night the most powerful empire in the world crumbled while dancing. Babylon was no ordinary city. It was the jewel of the ancient world. Walls 80 kilometers long, so wide that 2 war chariots could pass side by side. The Ishtar Gate, decorated with dragons and bulls enameled in blue. The Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. A city of 200,000 people who believed themselves invincible. The Euphrates River cut the city in half. The walls were so high and so thick that the Babylonians believed no army could conquer them. They were right. For centuries, no one had succeeded.
Nebuchadnezzar, the great king who had destroyed Jerusalem and taken the Jews captive, had transformed Babylon into an impregnable fortress. The Temple of Marduk, the city's god, stood above the plain, a mountain of brick and gold. Babylon was the center of commerce, science, and religion. Babylonian astronomers mapped the stars. Mathematicians created the sexagesimal system that we still use to count minutes and hours. The city was a beacon of civilization in the heart of the Middle East, and the Babylonians knew it. They felt safe. They felt chosen. They didn't know that history was about to write one of the most ironic chapters of all. The greatest city in the world would be conquered at the greatest party in history. The man who ruled Babylon that night was Belshazzar. But Belshazzar wasn't the real king. His father, Nabonidus, was the emperor. But Nabonidus had made a fatal mistake. He despised the priests of Marduk, the god of Babylon. He preferred to worship the moon god Sin. The priests never forgave him. To escape the intrigues, Nabonidus withdrew to the city of Tama in the Arabian desert, leaving the government of Babylon to his son, Belshazzar. Belshazzar was the regent prince. He was the heir. He was the de facto ruler, but he wasn't the king. And perhaps that explains his need to prove something, to show that he was as great as Nebuchadnezzar, to flaunt power he didn't have. On the night of October 5th, 539 BC, Belshazzar decided to prove his worth. He would throw the biggest party Babylon had ever seen. He would invite 1,000 of the empire's most important men. He would drink, dance, and celebrate. He would show that he, Belshazzar, was the true lord of Babylon. The banquet was meticulously prepared. The finest wines, the best meats, the best musicians, the most beautiful women. Everything in gold and silver. Everything to impress. Everything to overshadow his absent father. Everything to show that Belshazzar was the man who ruled the greatest city in the world. He didn't know that the world was about to collapse on his head. The party was at its peak when Belshazzar had an idea that would change everything. He ordered that the sacred vessels that his father, Nebuchadnezzar, had looted from the Temple of Jerusalem be brought in. Vessels of gold and silver that had been used to worship the God of Israel. Vessels that had been kept as war trophies. Vessels that no one had the right to touch. Belshazzar used them to drink wine. He and his 1,000 guests.
They drank from the sacred vessels while praising the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and wood. It was more than a drunken revelry. It was a profanity, an act of contempt for the God the Jews worshipped, a deliberate challenge to the divinity that Nebuchadnezzar had already recognized years before. And then the inexplicable happened. In the midst of the feast, a hand appeared. There was no one behind it, just a hand floating in the air. It wrote on the palace wall by the light of the torches. The king saw it. His face paled, his knees trembled. He summoned all the wise men and astrologers. No one could read the writing. No one could interpret what was written. Belshazzar was terrified. He had been promised riches, power, position. Whoever reads this will be the third man in the kingdom. But no one could, until the queen mother remembered a man named Daniel, a Jew, a captive.
A wise man who had already interpreted dreams for Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel was summoned. He looked at the wall. He read the words, and he pronounced the death sentence of an empire. The words Daniel read were simple. Mene, mene, tekel, uparsim. Counted, counted, weighed, divided. Each word was a sentence. Mene, God counted the days of Belshazzar's reign, and the days ended. Tekel, Belshazzar was weighed on the scales of divine justice, and he was found wanting. Uparsim, the kingdom would be divided, given to the Medes and the Persians. Daniel was not interpreting the future. He was announcing the present. While Belshazzar drank, Cyrus the Great, king of the Persians, was already at the city gates. While Belshazzar toasted, the Persian armies had already diverted the Euphrates and were entering through the dry riverbeds. While Belshazzar profaned the sacred vessels, history had already written its verdict. Babylon would fall, and it would fall that night. Belshazzar tried to keep his promise. He gave Daniel the purple robes and the gold chain. He proclaimed him the third in the kingdom, but it was too late. The words on the wall had already sealed his fate. And the king who was not a king, who had profaned the sacred, who had celebrated while the enemy entered, would discover that history is merciless to the arrogant.
Belshazzar was not killed by an army. He was not defeated in battle. He was killed while dancing, while drinking wine from Jerusalem's vessels, while his guests laughed and sang. The Persians entered Babylon through the dry bed of the Euphrates. The gates, which the Babylonians believed to be invincible, were opened from the inside. Some say the guards were drunk. Others say they were bribed. What matters is that the city, which had never been conquered, was conquered without a single blow. Belshazzar was killed that night. The Babylonian Empire, which had lasted for centuries, ended in a few hours. There was no epic battle. There was no heroic resistance. There was only silence. The silence of a city that awoke under foreign rule. The silence of a civilization that had ended while toasting. What happened in Babylon is one of the most ironic events in history. The greatest city in the world was conquered at the greatest party in history. The wine that should have celebrated Babylon's power celebrated its downfall. The desecration of the sacred vessels sealed the sentence. And the hand that wrote on the wall was no legend. It was history, writing its verdict in letters of fire. Babylon, 539 BC, the party that killed a civilization. Belshazzar, the king who was not a king, celebrated while the empire crumbled.
He used the sacred vessels of Jerusalem to drink wine, while the Persians entered through the sewers. The hand wrote on the wall, and that night, the empire fell. What happened in Babylon was not just the end of a civilization, it was a reminder that power is fragile, that arrogance precedes the fall, that history does not forgive those who desecrate what is sacred. The Babylonians believed that their walls would protect them forever, but walls do not protect against arrogance, they do not protect against decay, they do not protect against the invisible hand that writes on the wall. Babylon was forgotten. The walls crumbled. The hanging gardens turned to dust. The city that was once the greatest in the world became a pile of ruins in the Iraqi desert. But the lesson of Babylon remains. Empires fall not when they are invaded, but when they forget who they are, when they celebrate while the enemy enters, when they profane the sacred, when they believe they are invincible. That night, Belshazzar learned the truth, that all empires learn too late. No matter how high their walls, the wind of history always finds a crack,